Hi, welcome back to another Gibbs adventure. Jim here, and today I want to just go over real quickly rough skinning a beaver. A couple of do's and don'ts, some tricks that'll save you a lot of time. The idea is to produce the best possible pelt that you can for the fur market. The number one thing about that is the timing of your harvest. If you start too early, the beavers aren't prime yet, so sometimes the season's open for political reasons, so that trappers are sucked into trapping nuisance beaver for society. They cause a lot of problems, no doubt, but for the fur trade, we need to have underfur. There's markets for early fur, but not like there used to be. And so today, the two main markets are going to be still for shearable beaver for garments and for hatter beaver. Hatter beaver aren't summer beaver or fall beaver. They're going to be, after the 25th of October and on, you start getting underfur and that they can make felt out of. So the number one thing to start with is to dry the beaver. I go through a whole process when I bring my beavers in at first. First thing I do when I get them here is I brush them. I use a dog slicker brush and a coarse comb. And I always brush them out really good. I want the fur to be dry. And I brush my beavers quite a bit. So you can see my beaver's nice and dry. He's ready to be skinned. And it'll give you a really good, better pelting. Now, just before I really get going here, a couple things I want to talk about is skinning gloves. You got to protect yourself, especially the older you get nicks from wire and everything, and cuts and open cuts. You don't want to be skinning without skinning gloves. If you aren't using them, sooner or later it'll catch up with you. It's really easy to get blood poisoning when you're skinning and you get jabbed and you get some blood, because blood's a very active thing. And my daughter, the nurse here, is helping me today, and she's going to talk about a little bit about that right at the end there. But really important to wear an apron and skinning gloves. And try to work with something that's dry and have some sort of material right handy that's going to soak up any blood or anything that comes along as you're skinning an animal. So after I brush them out really well, put my brushes aside, I just touch up my knives really quick. I like a Zeph pelter and some sort of rounded beaver knife like so. And I also use a roofer's hook for opening them up. Okay, the beaver's nice and dry. The first thing I do is I take off his legs. And I always have a 5-gallon pail right beside me to catch everything. Beavers are the most valuable thing. The pelt has a certain amount of value, but for a guy in the north with a registered trap line, beaver are really important, because that's the bait that we're going to use to catch everything else over the course of the winter. So first step, like I said, take the four paws off. Okay, next I'm going to split them. So I start at the tail and I go up to the vent opening. I go a little piece on each side. I go right around the vent. Okay, once that's done, I got that open here. I take my knife and I go on each side of the tail. Okay, then I do the bottom of the tail, or I guess it would be the upside. Okay, so now I've cut around the tail, I cut it out, I've cut out the vent. I take my knife and I go up a couple of inches to get in front of the caster sacks, because sometimes if I'm not careful with my roofer's hook, I put a little nick in the casters. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do here now, I'll line up my beaver nice and straight. Boy, that's a nice fur, nice and heavy. Okay, and then I just take my knife, the back tip of my knife, and I run it up the length of the beaver. So I'm looking for a guide so that I can split the beaver in the right spot. If I don't like it, I'll just wipe it out again and I'll redraw it. Okay, when I think I have it right, then I take my roofer's hook, open up the thing. There's a little bit of a trick to this, and you want to hook it down the back a little bit. Okay, if you don't roll it back a little bit, you can split the beaver wide open, which is not a lot of fun because you'll gut them, and you don't want to gut them when you're doing it. Once I have my cut made, I always do this: pull it apart, trim back the lips just a little bit. Okay, put that over there because I'm going to use it later. Take my roofer's hook, get it off the table, and then I'm ready to start. So my method of skinning a beaver for me is rough skinning. There's lots of different ways. This is not the only way. I'm not trying to tell you one way or the other. I'm just trying to give you some tips on how to make sure your beaver is good for the market. So I'm catching it here, and I'm starting with the knife. I get a couple of inches, and I do the whole length of the beaver, right down to the tail. And I do a little bit of trapper education, teaching new trappers, and I always tell them the first 100 beaver are tough, and then after that they get a little bit easier. And what I mean by that is that it takes a little bit of experience to get comfortable and to know where your knife's going to work and doesn't want to work, what are easier and what are harder. This is a larger size beaver, and to be honest, it's much easier to skin a big beaver than it is to skin a little beaver. Small beaver are hard to do because the skin is very thin on them. On a bigger guy, it's more forgiving. Okay, so I get it to the leg, I pop that out, take my pelter knife, get in behind, pop it, and then I can just pull it with the knife and guide my knife along, and I got the whole leg out here. See how that's done? Go to the back leg. Okay, so on the back leg, again, I'm carefully gonna trim it out here a little bit, work my way to the end of the foot here, the leg, and then when I get it close enough, I just keep, and then I'll know, and I'll push it out with my fingers here. Okay, then I'll take my sharper knife, my pointed knife. There's a bit of a cartilage that's at the back of the heel here, and I like to get it off. Okay, and once I have it, I go back to my big knife, and I just work it down. So there, I got basically half my beavers already skinned now. Okay, so I give them the old spin around and start going again. So I'm lifting up the skin, I'm pulling on it, and I'm just peeling it off. I'm not worried about how clean skinned it is. Like I said earlier, it's a rough skin deal. And I'll get right down to the tail again. When I'm going full pin, meaning that I'm not filming it, of course, getting myself filmed there, I can go a little bit faster, and I can probably do, this is probably a solid large beaver, I can probably do it in 5 minutes pretty easily to get the pelt off. But then there's other steps I want to show you at the end that I do to it to get more value out of my beavers. I get it coming around. Get my finger in there, pull it. Take my pointed knife, come back, and then same thing. I can just work my knife out right down and get it right almost to the back of the neck there. All right, so then I keep coming down here. And if you watch what I'm doing here, I'm doing it in a process. I specifically did the front leg because I want to finish on the back leg, because after I get this thing the 4 legs out, I'm going to take the caster and the oil sacs out. So by doing that, I'm not jumping around. I'm following a pattern, and it allows me to, that's one of the tricks about getting faster at things, is to establish a specific procedure to get the beaver done. Now usually on this leg, I just use my beaver knife, and I can usually get it. Yeah, I got the cartilage, so it's perfect. Okay, so when I have it like this, now I have the 4 legs out. The first thing I'm going to do is take the caster out, because I want to take the caster. The reason I take out the caster right now is because it's less messy and less work for me. If I take it out after it's done, then I get a little more grease and blood on the table. So this way here, I can easily do it. So I cut above I feel where the casters are, and I cut above the caster. Okay, then I release it a little bit. I can tell this is a male because he's got his whip here. I trim that out, and then I can roll this out with my fingers. If you're getting a lot of red membrane on it, then I'll take my knife and I'll carefully trim it a little bit and just cut that saddle, that little bit of red membrane saddle off. Okay, so there I got my whole caster out here. Repeat on the other side. All right, so got it. It's connected, okay, in the center here, which is important. I pull it, and then I dock it off. And there you go. There's a nice clean set of casters that is taken out. And then the next thing I'll do, the oil sac is right below the caster. And I take the oil sac out. If you're making your own lures for beaver or martin fisher or lynx, the oil sacs are a nice additive. There's not a commercial market for it, but for a trapper who's a little bit savvy, he can make up his own lure. And the oil sacs are a good part of it. The beaver casters are used in the perfume industry. They're used in the food flavoring industry, so there's all kinds of difference. And it's also probably the most #1 lure base of every lure that's almost made. There's some sort of caster in it, or most lures. I shouldn't say everyone, because there's going to be exceptions to every rule, and somebody will call me out on it. But it's probably the most #1 ingredients for a lot of lures. Okay, so all I do is basically, if you look up here, I have some that I've done the day before. Okay, so they're nice and dry now. Okay, I hang it on my nail. I hang it here for 2 days. After the second day, I'll take it and I'll flip it over and open it up again to make sure that the center dries. Okay, so there'll be a little bit of a sticky part in here. I'll open that up, hang it back up again. Probably show you better on a bigger set here. Okay, just roll it over so that it's like that, and they're ready, and they're going to dry nicely for you. Now I leave them up on my nails for 3 to 4 days, and then I put them in the freezer. Before I sell them, I'll take them back out and put them on a piece of newspaper with a fan and dry them again. But that's how you handle beaver caster. There's some years the caster is almost as worth as much as the pelt. It fluctuates like everything else in the fur market, but a very valuable resource. A lot of guys don't take it out. Okay, so now that I have the beaver in this position, I have the caster, the oil glands out, I got the 4 legs out, I'm ready to finish pelting it off. One of the tricks that I do to have what I call my extra set of hands is I have a hook. It's just a barbless hook. I've grinded the big barb on it, and I use it to hook on the leg. Okay, and it gives me something to pull against. I call it my extra set of hands. And then once I do that, then I can start working my knife again. Okay, so I pull, lift it up, kind of get the beaver on an angle. Some guys like to use beaver cradles. Lots of different ways to do it. Just showing you my way that works for me. Okay, and I just keep working with my knife. Keep rolling it. Okay, I got it out from the tail. Now I can pull it. The next thing that's going to come out here is the back leg. So I'm leaving a lot of saddle. This is called a saddle, the extra meat on. So I'm always watching to see if there's any blood or anything, and I always have really handy paper towels. And if I see it dripping a little bit, I quickly clean it up a little bit from the nose here, because I don't want the blood getting into the pelt. Okay. And then again, go back. And once you get really fast at this, it takes minutes. I'm allowing the pelt to come to the edge of the skinning table, kind of put some weight to keep pulling, keep some pressure on it. Getting close to the head here. There's the ear. There's the other ear. Then I'll switch knives around the head, because with your good rounded beaver knife, it's kind of bone on bone here, or knife on the skull on the bone. So I do it like this to prevent my knife from getting dull. Okay, I'm coming up to the eyeballs. Usually if I make a mistake in a pelt, make a hole in it, I usually do it at the head here. Not as big a problem as putting a hole in the middle of the back. They don't really use the head. Okay, keep it going. And I'm pulling all the time here a little bit. You can see there's actually nothing there. That's the skull, the front teeth. Keep working it down and it comes out. So I have a piece of nose left. So the nose is here. The next thing I do is I'll fold them in half lengthwise and make sure that there's no fat showing. Okay, and then I'll hang them up. I want to make sure before I put him in the freezer that he's completely dry. So I did these earlier. I'll show you how I roll them up and put them in the freezer after that. But right now I want to show you what I do with the beaver pelts. Okay, still make sure I'm wearing my skinning gloves. I always make sure I don't have any holes in them. If I do, I change the glove right away, of course. I'll probably go wash my hands first and then replace the glove. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm going to process this beaver, because there's a lot of value in a beaver after the fact. The pelt is one thing, but the pieces, the carcass, the guts, the liver, the head, the tail all have some value. So first thing I do is I make a little bit of a cut around the back of the skull here. Okay, then I flip them over, make an incision here just below the rib cage. Have my bags ready. And what I'm after, because I do leech trapping, is I'm after the liver. Liver is one of the most important things when I'm leech trapping in the summertime, so I freeze it. So I pull out the liver. And into the bag. That's one thing that I do. Now, every beaver I'm going to use for bait, because it's really valuable bait. And there's two components to the bait. There's the stomach contents, the guts and all the organs. And then there's the actual meat itself. So I take my beaver, I have them open, I have a pail, and I feed all of the organs into a bucket to be used for wolf bait. So that's what I'll put out at my wolf places. Okay, so that's when I get 3/4 of a pail, I take it out, and then I take the kidneys out, and I use those also for using for leech bait. Okay, so my beaver's done. The last thing I do is I have a friend that makes jewelry out of the teeth. So I remove the skull. If you remember a second ago, I cut around the back of the neck. Okay. So I cut around the back of the neck and I just remove the skull. Yeah. Of course, I get one that's going to give me a hard time today. Okay, take it off. Again, I have my bag ready. And into the bag. Okay, so I got a little bit of blood on the table. I always have a pretty good supply of sawdust on hand. Just sprinkle a little bit on the table, cleans it up really fast. Okay, the next thing I want to do is bag my beaver. I'm going to use all my beaver for bait. Okay, so you can't freeze them in a block, because I think most of us have done that. You freeze a whole bunch of beaver together and you can never get them apart. So you get yourself a couple of or a box of cheap garbage bags, and I freeze each pelt like this. Okay. And then I place it in the freezer, and I'll freeze it like that, and then I don't have problems. Every time I go out in the bush, I'm going to take a couple of beaver carcasses with me, and away I go. And then all of my intestines and guts and stomach contents from the beaver is going to go out as wolf bait. So that's in a 5-gallon pail, and then when I start and I dig a hole at my wolf dump, I go there, I fill it in with the thing, top it with a little bit of ground and leaves and that, and then the wolves will key on that really good. So that's what I do with a beaver. The one last thing I didn't quickly talk about is the tail. Sometimes there's value if you have a market for a tail. In certain areas, there'll be people that'll buy the tails for the leather. They make things like leather tail wallets, keychains, knickknacks, and stuff like that. So it just goes to show you there's a lot of value in a beaver just besides the pelt. And a lot of people don't realize in society that a raw resource to make something into something has to come from somewhere. So a lot of value in a beaver. In some areas, the meat is really prized as something to eat. For different cultures and that, beaver meat is just as valuable as eating a beef roast for supper. So there you go. That's Beaver Handling 101 by Jim.
So wearing PPE is really important. Bare minimum, you should be wearing gloves while you're skinning because of the risk of zoonotic diseases. Beaver carry a lot of infectious risks like parasite and bacteria and viruses, so you want to protect yourself. You should also make sure you're not touching your face.
So when I first come back with my beaver from the trap line, the first thing I like to do is I take my beaver and I brush them out. Like they're still wet, but I get them brushed out really quickly and roughly. It's a bit of a process, but I want to get the hair laying the right way. Okay, and then I always have a fan or two. I put it on medium and I start to dry it. And you'd be amazed how much faster a beaver dries when you comb it out. So just as an example here, there's one that's not dry or combed yet, you know, versus one that's already combed out here. So you can already see it looks a lot better versus one that's not, you know, the fur's matted and everything. Get a lot of beaver in that when I buy beaver that are never been touched by a brush, so it's really important. And all this is a dog slicker brush. Just takes a second. I brush them out. A good combing is a must. And like I said, it'll help dry your beaver a lot faster, and it's a lot nicer to work with beaver that are already dry. And that's it. I kind of space them out like that. I get them dry, and then the next day I'll skin them. Now another tip for you that I've learned over the years, I never hang a beaver. You see a lot of guys, they'll hang them by the front leg or the back leg. It promotes the other end to bleed. So all the blood will pool at the other end, and when you start working with your knife, you get a lot more blood. Not saying it's right or wrong. This is just a method that I've developed over 40 years. I bring my beaver in, stock them, get them into the drying process, space them out. I'll let them dry like that with the fan on it for a couple hours, flip them, and then the next day I skin them, and then I don't have a lot of blood problems, pooled blood or bleeding a lot. And I find if I let my beaver sit for a day or two, the blood also congeals and it doesn't leak out of the carcass as much. So just a nice little tip for you if you're finding that you have a lot of blood sometimes when you're skinning. It's probably because you're hanging your beaver by the front leg or the back leg. The blood's going to go to the other end, and when you start opening it up, it comes out. So there you go.